Great, so thank you, and thank you very much for having me. I would have loved to join you in Russia, but I had another presentation in the US yesterday and yet another one this afternoon. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the flights work out. But some of you will have heard of the MOOC or the MOOC revolution. Since I can see all of you on camera, I'm actually curious. Can I ask, if you raise your hand, how many of you have heard of MOOCs or MOOCs before? Okay. Oh, great. So like maybe half the room. And how many of you have actually signed up for one of these? How many of you have actually signed up for a MOOC? Okay, great. So about like let's say 10% of the room. Great, thank you. Um, The MOOC movement is just over 3 years old. I think it was October 10th, 2011. So just October, 3 years ago, that a team of 4 students and I placed two of the first MOOCs on Coursera, and later that led to Coursera. A few months ago, I was chatting with one of Coursera students, Shamin Shahabuddin. Shamin lives in the relatively poor city of Bangladesh, and several years ago, she and a friend of hers decided to run away from home and build an independent life for for themselves. So when you're two girls in a poor city, how do you make a living? Shamin decided to start a bakery. This was challenging because Charmin and her friend had never baked before. And so in their first month, they brought in about 700 US dollars, which wasn't quite enough for two women to live in Bangladesh. But Charmin decided to persevere and started reading things on the internet, learning things on the internet in order to try to learn more and to develop a business. In the course of her learning, she came across Coursera, and she took her first course from the University of Pennsylvania on microeconomics, and she did well and earned her first Coursera certificates. She then went and took a second course on model thinking from the University of Michigan. But she didn't stop there. She went on to take a third course on finance, some advanced classes on economics, went back to UPenn for corporate finance, financial accounting, and marketing. And using the knowledge that Shamin has gained on the internet from Coursera and other free websites, Shamin has since built up a business substantially from having one employee, this girl that had run away with her, to today having 7 employees. And she has gone from having bringing in 700 US dollars a month to, in her most recent month when I spoke with her, making 5,000 US dollars a month. One inspiring thing about Xiaomi's story was when she built her bakery, not just as a place to make and sell baked goods, she thinks of her bakery as a place to teach and empower the women of Bangladesh. And so today, when a girl joins the bakery, she not only teaches them to bake, she also teaches them to read, she teaches them to write, and she is using the knowledge she had learned from UPenn, University of Michigan, and UC Irvine to help many other women in Bangladesh also build a better life for themselves. So I guess, and I think the gift when Shami and I chatted, we reflected that the gift of education is one of the gifts that keeps on giving. When I spoke to Shamin recently, I told her I was inspired by the story of leaving home, building a life for herself, and using it to empower other women in Bangladesh. And so I asked for her permission to share her story with others, such as with you. She gave me her permission, but she also gave me an instruction. She told me that whenever I tell her story, I should also say to you the following. Shami told me to say to you that the women of Bangladesh are very strong. They need only the opportunity to learn, to empower, and to support themselves. And I think that's where Coursera and our university partners come in. So many of you will know the story of how Coursera had gotten started. For many years as a professor at Stanford, I was teaching a 400 student Stanford class on machine learning, on a computer science class. And so 3 years ago, four students, three undergrads and one PhD student helped me put my class online, and it reached 100,000 students. So when I did the math, I think I realized that for me to reach a comparable size audience, I would otherwise have had to teach at Stanford University for 250 years. And so based on the success of these early courses 3 years ago, I invited a good friend to join me, and we decided to start Coursera to take the technology that my team had developed and partner with top universities to try to give everyone access to a great education. Since the early launch today, Coursera has actually over 100, well over 100 university partners from all around the world. We've grown from, 100,000 students in my first course to over 10 million learners worldwide. As I was preparing this talk, I spent some time revisiting our data from the Russian users as well. Today, Russia is the 8th largest market of Coursera MOOCs, and there are about 180,000 learners from Russia on Coursera today. I think the largest market is the United States, the second largest is China, I think India is the third, and then Russia is one of the most significant ones that we're interested in developing. And today, we also have 3 institutions of higher learning, MIPS in Pittsburgh and HSE, that are creating Coursera courses today. And so we have also a number of courses that were taught natively in Russian by these 3 institutions, as well as 4 courses that were taught in English but have been translated into Russian. I'll say a little bit more about our translation work as well, a lot of which was in partnership with Abby and with Digital October, also in Russia. So many of you are familiar with MOOCs, but maybe not also. So maybe I'll go through very quickly what the experience of taking a MOOC, or MOOC, Massive Open Online Courses. When you sign up for a MOOC, every week you'd be responsible for watching maybe an hour or 2 of lecture videos. But rather than an hour-long video of a professor, talking for an hour, these are usually 5 to 10 minute, highly engaging videos. But students learn best not by passively listening, but by doing things. And so all of our courses also have homeworks, which are perhaps computer graded, so that you can learn something, submit a piece of work, and get feedback on whether or not you understand the work. Teaching at Stanford, we usually take an average of 1 week to grade a piece of work and return the work to students. On Coursera, because of auto-graded homework, we take not 1 week, but we take 1 second to grade your work and tell you how you did. In the last 3 years, what we've seen is that our university partners have been able to explore a variety of rich pedagogies and have been creating increasingly complex interactions and homeworks for learners. And so here is an example of a class taught by Rice University. It's a fantastic intro to programming course in which learners are taught programming, and then they're invited to write code right there in their web browser, so that by the end of the course, every learner will have implemented for themselves this, asteroids spaceship game that you see on the right. And this is the sort of experience we can offer, or that our university partners can offer to learners all around the world for free. Not everything, so far I've been talking mainly about auto-graded work or computer-graded work. Not everything can be graded by a computer. And so one of the innovations I'm most proud of is peer grading, in which we developed a system where we can ask learners to do open-ended work, such as in this case, look at a case study of an Alzheimer's sufferer and write text describing a treatment plan for an Alzheimer's study, for an Alzheimer's studier, and then have other learners in the class grade your work and give feedback on the quality of your own work. Since launching peer grading, initially we thought peer grading would work well for essays because students grade each other's essays. We've been surprised by the richness and diversity of experiences that instructors have been able to give learners using peer grading. In this example, the University of Pennsylvania offered a course on design, and students were asked to build a physical artifact, use their cell phone camera to take a picture of what they had built and upload it to the Coursera website for students to grade each other's work. And so what I'm showing here is 3 actual examples of 3 actual homework submissions from learners in India, Spain, and the Philippines. So in addition to offering MOOCs, one of the other things Coursera does that is less appreciated is help university partners implement what's called the flipped classroom for on-campus education. So today, Coursera offers everyone around the world a great education. That's our mission. In addition, we also work with university partners to help them implement what's called the flipped classroom. And the idea is that now that you have lectures on the Coursera website, and now that you have even auto-graded homeworks on the Coursera website, what do you use the classroom time for? What we found is that by putting the lecture content online, students can watch the lectures online, where it's actually more interactive than sitting in a large lecture hall listening to a professor, because you can pause the video, fast forward, slow it down, read subtitles, do multiple choice quizzes, go to discussion forum. Our online videos are actually more interactive than large lecture halls. And having gotten the lecture at home, what this does is it preserves the classroom time for much deeper discussions. And so we're finding that this teaching technique is called the flipped classroom, that this is, we hope, also improving the quality of on-campus education. So today, Coursera, we think of ourselves as serving 2 populations. The first is the 10,000 learners, 10,000 and growing learners all around the world. To them, we give them access to a great education that many of them otherwise would not have easy access to. And then the second population that we serve is the much smaller group of, say, 50 students attending a Princeton or a MIT or a Peking University class, where by helping the university flip the classroom, we're improving the quality of on-campus education as well. Today, Coursera has a global reach. And I wanted to share a little more data of learners in Russia. The overall distribution of ages in Russia is similar to other countries, except that in Russia there's a higher concentration of learners from 20 to 35, so there are relatively fewer older learners from Russia. We're not entirely sure why, but we suspect this is a language issue where Russian users of a certain age are more likely to be fluent in English. And we are still in the process of working with our partners in Russia, like Abby, Digital October, to get more of the content translated into Russia, as well as working with our Russian university partners to teach more courses in Russia. And of course, our site is internationalized into many different languages. If you visit us from China, it looks like a Chinese website. If you visit us from Russia, it looks like a Russian website. And so we think that from day one, Coursera has always been a global enterprise. And finally, you've heard me mention translations a couple times now. What we have seen is that we've been doing a lot of work translating the content into Chinese, as well as other languages, as well as Russia, working with some of our partners in Russia. And what we found is that when we take mostly English language content and translate it into other languages, it does substantially improve the local enrollments. And so we've been very interested in translations into Chinese because China is the second largest market of Coursera users today. And we're also working hard to translate a lot of more and more content into Russian. I hope the figure on the left makes sense, where the blue line is the enrollment of a MOOC without translations, and the red line is the number of enrollments from China after a MOOC was translated. And so I think these courses are having a substantial boost in the number of enrollments through being translated. So what I wanted to do is share a little bit about maybe my perspective on where MOOCs are going as well. Oh, and by the way, you've heard me talk a little bit about China. Many of you will know that for the last 2.5 years, 3 years, I spent most of my time running Coursera. But more recently, I stepped into the role of chief scientist at Baidu, where I'm spending most of my time today. But I still remain a very active chairman of Coursera. But so in the last maybe several minutes, love to share with you some things I see coming down the pipe in terms of massive open online courses. And would love to save time toward the end for questions as well. But starting in the US, but increasingly in other countries as well, we're seeing a rapid rise of the degree to which MOOC credentials are accepted. So a few weeks ago, actually a few months ago, I was chatting with another Coursera learner, Zacs their store. He told me that about a year and a half ago, he had found himself single, living in New York, and stuck in a job that he really did not find exciting, working for an investment bank. His background was in theoretical mathematics, but what he really wanted to do was to do data analytics. So what do you do when you're 25, single, in New York at a time of relatively high unemployment and wanting to change your career? Zach decided to quit his job and spend time taking free online, open online courses. And he told me when I asked him how he felt doing this, quitting his job, living without a paycheck, and just spending his time learning online, the word that Zach used to describe how he felt was he said he felt terrified. But he then spent the next 5 months taking MOOCs. His first course was a data science course offered by Johns Hopkins on Coursera. And right away, he actually ran into trouble. The course was offered in a programming language called Python, and he never programmed in Python before. But Zach went online, read a bunch of free tutorials on the Python programming language, did online exercises on Python, and after spending 40 hours, he told me, after spending 40 hours on homework 1, he submitted his first homework written in Python. It was an exercise to write Python code to analyze Twitter feeds, and he got full marks, and he then completed that homework successfully. He completed the second homework, the third homework, until eventually he completed the data science course from Johns Hopkins and earned his first certificate from Coursera. He took a second class on startup engineering, and then he took my machine learning class, which is how he and I wound up meeting and chatting. And after 5 months of doing this, he then placed his resume online in order to try to find a better job. Initially, he again had trouble. Initially, he posted his Coursera certificates on his resume and tried to find a job in data science, which is what he wanted to do. The first few phone calls with recruiters did not go well. The recruiters would say to him, hey, Zach, it looks like you have a degree from Minnesota on theoretical mathematics, but it looks like you have this fascinating hobby called data science, but we're a serious company and we can't offer you a job for your hobby. So he had a few calls like that didn't go well. But then finally, he had a call from Columbus Teachers College, and right away it was a match made in heaven. They invited him for an interview. They invited him back the next day for a second interview. They handed him a job offer. He signed that the next week. And today, Zach continues to work at Columbus Teachers College using the newfound skills he had gained from MOOCs, applying data analytics to the data that Columbus Teachers College has. And perhaps with some irony, what he does now is he analyzes student retention data at Columbus Teachers College in order to help them improve their student retention. Just to close as a story, when I spoke with Zach, I asked him, how things are going and what his life is like at Columbus Teachers College and whether he continues to take MOOCs on Coursera. And he said something interesting to me. He said, well, Andrew, when I was living without a job and just studying full-time, that went great because he just spent all his time studying. But now that he has a full-time job, he's continuing to take a class to try to learn to play the guitar on Coursera. But he said, now that I have a full-time job, trying to take classes in my little spare time in the evenings, he said, that's been really tough. So even though MOOCs have started from university courses, the biggest impact of MOOCs today is not on university learners, is on adult continuing education. So the main group of learners taking MOOCs is people like Zach that are educated, that already have a bachelor's degree, that often have a job, are often in their 20s or 30s, and that hope to improve their career prospects or that are interested in learning something new. And so when you think of a MOOC student, don't think of a college student, although we do have some number of college students. Most of them are working professionals. And I think the reason for that is in today's rapidly changing world, all of us need regular infusions of knowledge in order to stay current. And I think the convenience of a MOOC is bringing many working adults back into the educational system. And so when learners take a course on Coursera, the course is free, but if a learner wants to earn a verified certificate where we do some work to verify their identity, then we charge a modest fee for that. And I guess the way this works is when a learner wants us to verify their identity, verify that they're the one submitting the homework, we use a combination of checking their government-issued ID, as well as taking their picture using their webcam with their permission every time they submit the homework. And finally, using keystroke biometrics. We measure your typing rhythm. It turns out your typing rhythm is fairly unique. It's like a fingerprint. And so using a combination of those techniques, we verify that it really is you sitting on your keyboard submitting work. And on that basis, we've been issuing verified certificates, which learners like Zach are listing in their resume and often successfully using to find better professional opportunities. So for the first year and a half of the MOOC movement, we were offering course certificates for single isolated courses. And actually, and I guess earlier this year, we launched a new effort where we offer learners a higher level of certificates, where instead of offering a single course and a single certificate for one course, we invite learners to take a sequence of courses and on that basis offer a higher level certificate that certifies that learners have mastered a certain body of knowledge. What we found is that employers can evaluate, but find it somewhat hard to evaluate a single isolated course. But when a learner takes a set of courses and masters a body of knowledge, then we and our university partners can certify that, and that creates a more valuable credential. And so one of our first specializations, is what we call these course sequences, was on Android programming, where learners take 3 courses and then complete a capstone project. And on that basis, we issue a specialization certificate. Our most popular specialization is the data science specialization offered by Johns Hopkins. And again, specialization certificates like these are now allowing learners to earn more valuable credentials that we find are easier for employers to evaluate. So I think what we've seen in the MOOC movement is that we have been, we don't have hard data on this, but we have in the United States been seeing a rise over the past, since the beginning of the year, a rapid rise in the flood of stories we hear from learners regarding their earning certificates from Coursera and successfully using these to find better employment opportunities. We think that this is happening first in the US and then Asia and Europe, including Russia, we think are rapidly undergoing this transition as well. Finally, there is one other big change happening in the MOOC movement, which is that when we launched the first MOOC 3 years ago, the first few MOOCs had deadlines. My very first MOOC on Coursera, I guess even before Coursera, my first MOOC, it was 4 students and me working late nights for 10 crazy weeks trying to keep the class up and running. But one of the maybe features we had back then was deadlines, where there was a deadline for every homework and you had to submit your work on time or else you would lose points. And what we've learned since then was that the number one reason for learners dropping a course is that they miss a deadline because life got in the way. We're serving primarily continuing adult learners, and these are people with jobs and children often, and often something will happen or they'll be busy at work and they miss a deadline, and that has been the #1 reason for a learner dropping a course. The second largest reason, or second common reason for a learner to not complete a course, is that there is often a large gap between when a course starts and, between when a learner finds the Coursera website, when they discover the Coursera website for the first time, and when the course actually starts. So if you go to the Coursera website, you might find a fascinating class on astrobiology, but if the class doesn't start for 6 months, then you have to sign up for it and wait 6 months. And sometimes the content has already been created. It's just that the university doesn't have the bandwidth to offer the same course again for another 6 months. And I think having people wait months for content is not how the internet should work, and we would rather get learners what you want when you want it, and really to move the content to on demand. So our data is that between the time a learner signs up for a class, when they sign up for a class, they clearly want the content. But between when they sign up for the class and when they can actually get access to the content, there is often about a 50% fall off, because if you make someone wait several months before they can get access to content, their interest may change in DRAM, or they may forget, or something might happen. So only slightly, about 50%, a little bit more than 50% of the learners that sign up for a class will actually come back and do the first week of work. And so one big transition that our university partners and us are going through now is moving away from the deadline-based courses to the on-demand model for MOOCs. And so I think that when you teach in a university, like when you teach at Stanford University, which I have been doing for many years, you want a deadline because it's convenient for us as instructors to collect all the homeworks in a pile, so we can grade all the homeworks in a pile and return them all in a pile. So we have deadlines because it's convenient for instructors. But and logistically, it's really necessary to have a deadline in a university. But in a MOOC on a website, there's really no good reason, in my opinion, to have deadlines anymore. And so we and our university partners have been rapidly migrating courses to this on-demand format. And so the courses that are on-demand have been doing well. What we're seeing is that when you put a course on demand, there's a large spike in student activity, and then it dips a little bit, but then it plateaus and slowly grows. But it either plateaus or slowly growing. And so we think that having this content up all the time will improve the access we can give to learners. So just to wrap up, the MOOC movement is just a few years old now, and for Coursera, where we view ourselves is as a two-sided marketplace. And what that means is, similar to say Amazon, which connects producers of merchandise with consumers of merchandise, Coursera's goal is to connect producers of great educational content with consumers of that educational content. And I think that what we do at Coursera is create success at scale. I think that our institutions of higher learning in the US and Russia and China are some of the best, some of the most valuable institutions on the planet. But for now, they have been teaching only relatively small numbers of learners. I think the universities of tomorrow will not be judged by the tens of thousands of students they educate. They will be judged by the millions of students they educate. And just as today, the success of a university's alumnus is reflected on the university, and Stanford University, continuously brags about how Stanford personnel were involved in the founding of Cisco and Yahoo and Google and VMware and a whole bunch of other tech companies. In the same way, I think the successes of learners all around the world will similarly be reflected on the universities that created those successes. So I think the success of Charmin will be reflected on UPenn, University of Michigan, and UC Irvine, and the success of Zacs will be reflected on Stanford University and Johns Hopkins, and this will be true for millions of learners around the world. And I think that for far too long, education has been available only to a small team and to a small group of privileged people around the world. But I think that with technology, we now have the opportunity to democratize education and give everyone access to a great education. We're still in the early phases of this revolution in education. We've been doing this for a few years, but we have only 10 million learners, and I hope we will have 100 million or maybe 1 billion learners someday. But so far, I think the trajectory, the mission to give everyone access to a great education looks good, and I'm excited to continue to develop MOOCs in Russia and globally as well. And so with that, let me say thank you all very much.
Andrew, thank you so much for this inspiring talk, and especially for this very interesting facts about involvement of Russian universities and Russian students into Coursera activities. That was really great. And I think there should be a number of questions. Yes, please, there.
Andrew, thank you for your talk, and I am proud to be a lecturer at MIPT, which is present on your platform. I personally wanted to ask you the following. You are a professional working in artificial intelligence, but the format of courses which is currently implemented in Coursera is rather narrow, well, to my opinion, because you still have those video lectures and those quizzes. Can you dream of any real application of artificial intelligence in educational process beyond just recommending new courses to the students? What's your dream? How can artificial intelligence help? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for that question. That's a great question. In fact, I don't normally do this when answering questions, but that's such a great question. Let me actually answer that with even with slides. I think, one of the opportunities for massive open online courses is we collect a lot of data. So similar to Yandex or Baidu, where I work now, and other internet companies, we observe a ton of data. Because on a website, your activities, the learner's activities are in the digital realm. We collect every keystroke, every mouse click, every homework submission, correct or incorrect. And this is allowing us to understand student learning like was never possible before. And this is true in the sheer number of students, 10 million learners, as well as the detail of data per students. So I think Coursera is helping to have really big data, or AI big data, meeting education. So we do a lot of work to make the data available to instructors such as yourself with dashboards that show you aggregate summaries of what is happening in your course. So we've actually invested a lot of work in dashboards like these to show you where your learners are coming from and so on. And on top of that, our university partners and us are also doing a lot of studies using the data to better understand human learning. So I'm showing you just screenshots of the dashboards, but let me give you just one example of a study that we did using this data, which is that, let's see. So I'll just tell one story because this turned out to be surprising to me. It turns out that we learned from the data, right, from the number of learners with us. We learned that if we send learners an email every week that says, dear student, friendly reminder, homework is due this Saturday. If we send that email, students are less likely to complete the class. They're actually less likely to engage, which is surprising. But if we send you an email that says, dear students, we noticed you logged into the website last week. Good job on that. We noticed you did the last homework on time and you did well in the homework. Great job on that. We noticed you posted 2 comments in the discussion forum and 5 other students found that really helpful. Great job on that too. Oh, and by the way, the next homework is due this Saturday. It turns out if we send that email, students are more likely to engage and more likely to complete. Now, in hindsight, perhaps it's no surprise that if we remind you of what you did well before asking you to take the next step, then you're more likely to be motivated and to complete the course. But the way we discovered that was not by original insight. One of our engineers sent I think he had 2 to the 5, so he had 32 different designs of emails, and he sent each of these email designs randomly to tens of thousands of students, and then we looked at the data to see which cohort was the most likely to complete, and only then we went back and actually read the emails and we figured out this effect. So if you think about it, if we had only a couple hundred students in the class, we would never have discovered this effect. But it was only because we had an engineer that could send tens of thousands of emails that the data allowed us to discover this effect. So what we're seeing today is that this sort of educational data we're getting is relatively unique. I believe that Coursera over the past year has collected more educational data than the entire academic field of education over the entire 5,000-year history of the academic field of education. And what we're finding is that even relatively simple AI and machine learning techniques is allowing us to pick out low-hanging fruit and discover effects like these, because no one has had this data before. No one has applied even simple techniques to understand this data before. Over the longer term, I would love for AI to be more used in more significant ways to guide students with personalized tutors and so on. But at least so far, there's been so much more just very low-hanging fruit that we've not had for Coursera, we've not had to explore the most. The really heavyweight AI techniques like the latest algorithms in deep learning and so on.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there are lots of questions. Can I? Yeah.
First of all, thank you a lot. Actually, I would like to ask you a lot of questions, but I have three the most interests to me. And the first one, what do you think could at the future Coursera replace? Do you think at the future Coursera could replace traditional higher education system, for example, in Russian Federation?
Right. So let me ask that question let me just actually, often I do get asked, will MOOCs replace professors, or will MOOCs replace universities? And to answer that, let me ask all of you in this room to think about your favorite teacher, right? Your favorite teacher that you had in college or in high school, or middle school, or elementary school. So think about the conversations you had with your favorite teacher and the mentoring that you had with your favorite teacher. And let me ask, do you think we can replace him or her with a computer? I think, at least I hope the answer is no, and we'd be silly to even try. I think the reality, though, is that favorite teacher of yours is spending most of their time giving the same lecture year after year. They're spending most of the time grading homeworks. Frankly, most teachers, one of teachers' most least favorite activities. I think the opportunity for technology is not to replace that teacher, which would be a tragedy. I think the opportunity for technology is to use automation to automate the more routine, repetitive aspects of teaching, so as to free up that favorite teacher of yours to have even more time to have amazing conversations with students in the future, just as they did with you. Now, what I just said is what I think will happen for countries that do have relatively good higher educational systems. There are some developing economies like sub-Saharan Africa, or even parts of India, actually, frankly, almost most of India, I guess, where there isn't a good educational system. For places like that, I think that just as developing economies has leapfrogged desktops, right? So in developing economies, for most of us, my first computational device was a desktop computer, or maybe for some of you it was a laptop. In developing economies, their first computational device is a smartphone. And so I think that in countries with no higher ed infrastructure, it might just take too long to build up a decent higher ed infrastructure. And there, I think that the opportunity is not for MOOCs to replace professors. The problem is they just aren't professors. But I think there will be new models of education where you jump straight to MOOCs. But I think when you can get a professor, you are much better off, so much better off having automation help a professor deliver even more value than they do today.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. There was one question there, I think. No? Yes, there's a question.
So thank you for a great talk. And the question is now a lot of talk about a learning based on users' preferences. What's your opinion about? Is it possible to build a track for a certain person based on his opinion in your Coursera? What's your opinion? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think broadly, I think personalization of content and personalizing the learning styles. How much can you personalize content? I think that there's value to that. For example, maybe if I teach a machine learning class, maybe if you're interested in biology, we can offer some lectures on biology, a project on biology. If you're interested in websites or online platforms who have content skewed to that. What we found is that these levels of personalization, while they're valuable, it dramatically increases the cost of content production. And so right now, my feeling is to give students personalized pathways to content. It makes things significantly more complex for instructors to develop and to think through multiple pathways for learners. So I think for content with very, very high demand. So take K through 12 content, like primary and secondary school, where everyone needs to learn algebra. And so many people need to learn that content that I think for things like that, these sorts of personalized pathways might make sense. I see Khan Academy doing very interesting work in that space. But for higher education, even most higher education is much broader. There are thousands of courses in higher education, and so far we've not been able to marshal the resources to do that, to do high degrees of personalization of personalized learning pathways. What we found is that they're allowing learners to pace the content is one form of personalization. Just how fast you go, do you replay the material? When do you take a quiz versus watch a lecture again? That's a much more rudimentary form of personalization, but that is something you can do in a MOOC that you can't do in a traditional university class where you have one professor standing in front of the classroom lecturing in the whole classroom. So that much more rudimentary form of personalization is getting us, I think, actually a lot of bang for the buck as well. But the more personalized content is something I would love to figure out a way to do more of that, if we can figure out how to do that without blowing up the cost of content production.
Okay, thanks a lot for getting up so early, joining us today.
Great, so great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.